All right, folks, this is Haris Sultan, and as I had promised in my last video, that I intend to speak with a few more Israeli Jews, Israeli Zionists, because this conflict made me open my eyes. Because despite being an atheist for a very long time, I held views that I think I would now classify as not only just anti-Israel, but probably anti-Semitic as well, even though I didn't see myself as someone who doesn't like Jews because I was an atheist. I had left Islam behind. But some of the views that we grew up with, I never felt the need to revisit them. I never felt the need to look into them. I even read a book about Israeli-Palestinian conflict, so I tried to be as objective as I could. And I saw both sides, but I still felt that it's Israel all evil and then Palestinians are just victims. No issue as complex as this can be that simple or can be that simplified. So it's been a learning curve for me, and I think I still am learning. So even though my views are constantly evolving, and that's why I'm trying to talk to as many Israeli Jews as possible. And I would love to speak with some Palestinians as well, but I don't think they would want to talk to me right now, or at least the ones that matter, because of my opinions on this conflict. So without further ado, Corey, thank you very much. Welcome to our conversation. Corey is, as I said, is an Israeli Jew, and he's the creator of the Ask project. Corey, just tell us a little bit about this Ask project. What is it, and why are you so interested in this?
Okay, just to clarify, I'm Canadian. I moved to Israel, so I'm not a typical Israeli. But as a Canadian, we're great observers. We're very good at seeing what's around us and telling people what we see, or at least from our own perspectives. So I've lived in Israel for about over 20 something years, off and on since 1989. I studied conflict. I have a master's in conflict studies from the University of Ottawa. And when I moved back to Israel, I was looking for something to work in or to do with the conflict itself, but the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I hadn't really worked in it. I was just interested in the dynamics of conflict, mostly psychological dynamics in conflict. And what I saw were a lot of foreigners online arguing about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There were no Israelis, there were no Palestinians. It was all foreigners saying, no, I have an article from Haaretz, or I read a book. And so they knew whichever side they were on, pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. And what I thought was missing was seeing what regular people thought, because what we hear in the media is through the lens of whatever media you hear, whether it's BBC or Sky or American news, it's through their lens. And you hear what the leaders have to say. You almost very rarely hear what a regular person has to say. And so I thought, actually, somebody dared me to ask people, because they thought that most people would agree with them and not agree with me. And that actually sparked the idea of, I have a video camera. Why am I not just recording the conversations that I have with people? And in my mind, I also knew that if you ask a question, if you simplify things down to the form of a question, it helps focus what we're talking about. And it just appeared on my mind, why am I not asking people questions and putting them up on YouTube at the time, or Facebook? So I dared actually the group who thought they knew everything about Israelis to give me a question for Israelis. Nobody had any questions. They all knew everything because they were all anti-Israel. So they all knew everything. And finally, somebody said something about the one-state solution. I said, can I turn that into a question and ask? And they said, yeah, sure, go with it. And so I did. And that was my first video in 2012. And since then, very quickly, I developed the idea of asking a question to be as geographically distributed as possible. So I get different views from around Israel. I try to ask 8 to 10 people. I do not just take out any content. Everything that I film is there unless somebody says, take me out. And I do not edit any content out of it at all, period, other than people's names, because sometimes they give me fake names, which is fair. And so I put it up, and I just hoped people would watch. And the idea is to understand what the average Israeli thinks. Then I started very quickly, within a couple months, going to Palestinian, the West Bank, not Gaza, West Bank, to ask Palestinians what they thought, taking similar questions, not my questions, other people's questions, and asking them to answer them. And that's what I've been doing. I have over 1,000, probably 1,100 videos, unique questions. Millions of views on some of them. Interesting enough, it's always about Jesus, what they're mostly interested in. To me, bizarre as an atheist Jew, but okay. And so people learn about the conflict from hearing regular people give their views on it.
So I'm assuming you would have spoken to thousands of people, both Palestinians and Israelis. If I was to ask you, what do you think, in your opinion, is their understanding? Obviously, you'd see a lot of Israelis being pro-Israel and a lot of Palestinians would be pro-Palestine. But in your experience, did you feel that neither of the two sides were actually as empathetic as they probably should be?
So that's almost entirely what you get. It's a little bit different. So for two people who live next to each other, they don't know a lot about each other. I would say Israelis know a little bit more about Palestinians than Palestinians know about Israelis, meaning West Bank Palestinians who are Arab Israeli citizens know a little bit more. So that's a little bit of a different group. But I would say it's worse with Palestinians. Palestinians in the West Bank know absolutely nothing about Israeli Jews. There's a lot of myths. That's the first thing I started to find out about Israelis and Jews and Zionism. Israelis, too, have a lot of myths. There's a little bit more. There used to be what's called the left wing here, but it's almost gone, of Israeli Jews who really believe in peace with the Palestinians. Israeli Jews who really grew up with this idea that one day there will be peace with the Palestinians. And so you do get just as disillusioned a view from them, meaning there's some people who don't even understand that a lot of Palestinians really don't recognize that they even exist. So it really depends. It depends on which group you're talking to and who you're talking to. But yeah, there's not much.
I would have thought pretty much that's how it would be, because obviously Israel, after all, is still a Western-style liberal democracy. So there would be a left wing, there would be a right wing, and then there would be people in the middle, whereas people in Palestine, be that as it may, they're constantly reminded that you've been victimized, you're occupied people, and then that could obviously certainly increase their hostilities. There's so much to ask you on that Ask project, but I want to keep the conversation going. So let's just start with, how do you actually see the current conflict from your perspective as an Israeli Jew? And the historical implications of it. Do you see that was fair, the creation of Israel, the way it was done? Because I have...
Oh, we're going all the way back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's $1 million question. Where do you start from? Do we go all the way back to the Romans or David or Solomon? What is it?
I don't know. That's my question to everybody.
So I have a belief of convenience, if you want to call it that, because I have a similar opinion about my country, about Pakistan. Pakistan was created in the name of religion. I don't agree with that, but I do believe in that whatever's done is done. You can't dismantle things. Since whatever reason it was created for, it's there, so we have to learn to live with it.
I would correct you, though, because you're thinking of Judaism like people think of Islam or Christianity, and Judaism is different. I am an atheist. I do not believe there is a God. It makes no sense to me. I couldn't care less. Today's Hanukkah. I don't care. Couldn't care less about these things. I'll go to something. If I get fed, I'm fine. That's fine. But I don't really care about the religious aspects. I'm still a Jew. So being a Jew is similar to being other groups like Druze or Sikhs, where you are a people and you have a religion. And we just happen to call now, today, Jews and Judaism by the same name. So Israel was established as a Jewish ethnic state in that sense, meaning of the Jewish people. Actually, the original people who created it were maybe not atheists, but did not really believe much in the religion. They were not that influenced by the religion.
Yeah, but you can't ignore the actual religious element behind the creation of Israel.
No, of course not. But I'm just saying, it depends on, so if you're talking about in 1948, my opinion, let's get back to that. If I had been a Jew living in Palestine in 1947, I probably would have been, knowing my personality, saying, no, we don't need to create this Israel thing. We're fine under the British. Let's just be British. And we'll just be a Jewish enclave, and there's this Arab enclaves, and we'll just figure out a way to get along. Because I am the type of person with the status quo, whatever it is, unless we're suffering, I don't dream of some better future. But I would have been the very small minority.
That's exactly what I was about to say, that if I was in the 40s, I would not have supported the creation of Pakistan or even Israel. But now it's there. Now I'm all for Israel's existence and continuation.
It exists. It doesn't really matter what the original intent was. The UN recognized it. Countries recognize it's a country, international law. That's the way it is. So what do we do now?
Yes. And that's my justification as well. Israel, as we briefly touched upon this, Israel is a Western-style liberal democracy. It has a left, it has a right. Yeah, I know it's not perfect on all of those fronts, but it is that. I heard someone say it, that the only Muslims in the Middle East who can choose their leader, they live in Israel. Although I think Iraq is now a democracy. So
yeah, true. That is more
or less it's true. But it might not be perfect, but it won't be fair to judge Israel on those metrics either, because it is constantly facing this existential threat to its statehood. But it is still, after all, a Western-style liberal democracy. It has a left wing, it has a right wing, it has people in the middle. And as you said, a lot of people are not even Jewish, that they don't follow Judaism. They're not even religious.
It's a minority. I would say it's a minority today. But
so Jewish atheists are a minority. I've heard that it's pretty significant, the number of.
No, the majority of Israelis
are practicing Jews.
There is a sorry.
Are they practicing Jews?
Oh, of course. Right. Most people. It depends what you define as practicing. So if you go by voting records, 13% or 15% are Haredi, like the black hats, the curls. Then another 10, 15% are national religious. So they're, Orthodox. They don't drive on Shabbat. They keep kosher. Then there's people we call traditional. There are another 40, 50% who are generally Middle Eastern Jews. They may drive on Shabbat, but they only keep kosher. It's a big spectrum of people. If you ask people, do you believe in a personal God? I would say 80% here do, 80, 90. Someone who says I'm an atheist is maybe 10%, maybe.
Okay.
I'm guessing, I haven't checked any statistics, but that would be my guess.
So my question was that when we look at this conflict, obviously Palestinians have very strong views, and they've got 1.8 billion Muslims that are constantly egging them on. And I have a very firm stance on that. One of my tweets that went viral with 8 million views or something, I highlighted the point that if it was about Muslim lives, then these Muslims would have been making noise about all the Yemenis that were killed by MBS, or all the Syrians that were killed by Bashar al-Assad. It's not about that. If, and we're going by Hamas's numbers, if 15,000 Palestinians have died during this conflict, it's 15,000 too many, but it's still nothing compared to nearly 500,000 people who have died since 2014 in those two conflicts alone. But we never saw Muslims coming out in Western capitals and asking MBS or asking Bashar or forcing their governments to somehow start a ceasefire or something. So this has got to do with, first of all, the religious fantasy, no matter how much they say that, no, it's not about that, it's about ethnic, local, indigenous people. Now, why are you so interested in these people? It's got nothing to do with that. Sorry, I'm not buying it. It's got to do with, it is deeply rooted in Islamic theology. I'm sure you would have heard of that. End time prophecy, there will be fight in this region, and even
for Hamas people.
A lot of Muslims, whether they might, as I said, even when I became an ex-Muslim atheist, even then, not that I believed in those hadiths though, but I still held those views that I didn't pay enough attention to investigate the issue. I still had those views. I didn't give the people of Israel or Jews the courtesy of, okay, let me revisit my position and let me investigate it. I didn't do it. So people who are still Muslims, even if they're not fundamentalist Muslims, but they still have those thoughts in their mind that, okay, this is what's going to happen in the end times. This is why you see these moderate lipstick Muslims, even they are so passionate about this conflict, and they have a very one-sided view, which is Palestinian good, Israel evil, and so forth. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a survey, the 95% of the worldwide Muslim population, they would see Israel as bad, and a big chunk of Muslims would want that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free kind of thing, which we're trying to tell them that you're basically saying either kill or displace 7 million Jews. But the thinking is so shallow that they become parrots. Basically, they keep parroting away what they've heard rather than taking a pause and thinking about what it actually means. But when it comes to Israel, I spoke with our common friend Rafi, and he was telling me that there are a lot of people who, in Israel as well, who are very dogmatic in their approach. I'm paraphrasing, he probably didn't use the same word, but they're very radical in their approach about preservation of Israel or keeping the West Bank and Gaza either blockaded or occupied, whatever term you want to use. What about those people? Because Israel, as I said, is still supposed to be a Western liberal democracy, which is supposed to follow the international law. And I'm not saying that it doesn't follow it, but to me, the status quo is unsustainable. You can't go on for another 70 years like that. We're not looking to find a solution. What is the solution? Sorry, before we get to the solution, can you comment on that right-wing group? What is their number? How big are they? And how do you see them as an atheist Israeli Jew?
So, okay, a lot of little things. So, first of all, the right wing basically took over. There is no left anymore. There's maybe, I'm not even sure what you would define as right, center, and left.
I have 36%. The last survey showed, very quickly, let me throw that number in. The number was 41% back in 2011 or something. And now the number has gone
up. Of what? 41%?
Of Israelis who were in favor of a two-state solution. So now I think the number has dropped to 35%.
Okay, now that's down to 20 something. Now it's down to 20, yeah.
So it is shrinking.
Yes. So it depends, but that doesn't necessarily mean exactly left and right. It's a little bit more complicated here, but okay. So in terms of people who believe in a two-state solution, yes, I think it's down to 20-something%. I know this because I don't work on it, but I actually publish the Peace Index from Tel Aviv University. So I also work at Tel Aviv University for a master's in conflict resolution. My boss does actually the statistics and the surveying on what Israelis think about peace. Since the second Intifada, so late 90s, early 2000s, basically, when there was a lot of Palestinian violence towards the Oslo process, I'll give the Israeli view, Israelis moved sharply right. Everybody just moved completely right. The left was gone almost completely, which means they stopped believing that there could be peace with Palestinians. The dominant view I'll summarize this, the dominant view is either two options, that Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza live under Israel, and they'll be equal-ish. I'll give the right-wing view as equal-ish, meaning they'll have all social rights, but they won't have political rights. It's the simplistic version, meaning they couldn't be prime minister, but they'll get the same rights I have, and they'll get a passport, not an issue, but they can't vote. They can't become prime minister, and there's certain things, anything to do with security, they wouldn't be able to vote on. How you would do that in a democracy, no clue. I've asked them myself. They don't have
Pakistan does it.
Then
Pakistan
the middle view.
Pakistan does it, by the way. Pakistan, no non-Muslim can ever become a prime minister or president in Pakistan. Yeah,
Really?
So it's actually one of the biggest apartheid states.
Okay.
Yeah. So they've managed to do it.
Okay, I didn't know. So yes, I have an issue with that, because if you call yourself a democracy, and I believe in democracy, that's my Canadian background, everyone has to have the exact same rights. There's no such thing. But they call it a Jewish democracy, and I have an issue with this. By the way, this is supported, and I don't want to, this almost sounds a bit racist, but the majority of Jews in Israel are Jews from Middle Eastern and from Islamic world, right? Their view on this is much more similar to what, not exactly Muslims, but their view is that idea of a Jewish democracy, meaning like under Islam, you'll be fine under Judaism, under Jewish rule, not even Judaism, it's Jewish rule. We're going to take care of you. Don't worry. But no, you cannot have all the same rights as us. You can have social rights, you can get your national insurance, and you can get your education exactly the same way I do, and you have all the rights to do economically everything I do. However, you cannot be in charge of security, and you cannot be in charge of my self-determination. That's the right-wing view. The center view, because there is no more left-wing view, the center view is Palestinians will be similar to what they are now in their little cantons. They don't call it cantons, but I'll use that word. Little areas where they are self-determining, meaning they have no power over or no control over the borders. They do not have an army. They have a police force, but they have total self-determination within their own cities and areas. That is the centrist view. And they would call that, okay, we could have a two-state solution in that way. Meaning it's not exactly a state, it's a state, but we have to have security, and mostly after October 7th, we, the Jews, have to have total security control. We cannot trust anyone else. Look what happened. That is basically what, I don't know if I answered the questions in any way, but that is what Israelis think about peace. That's
a very depressing answer, because so this is how I see it. I see that Israel has legitimate concerns that, look what happened after the 2005 disengagement. We exited from there, and look what happened. These people want to wipe us off the map. So if we create another independent Palestinian state which behaves like a free country, this will be a hostile nation towards us. I understand that. I think nobody can deny that, looking at the recent history over the last 75 years of Israel.
I agree, and I want them to have self-determination. Go ahead.
Yeah, but we understand that Israel has legitimate concerns. But having said that, be that as it may, you can't preemptively do it. And I have a feeling that because, and I think as a Jew, you might be worried about this, because I have seen all these demonstrations of the millions of people coming out in every major Western capital, and how they are literally terrorizing Jews. Their number is only going to increase. And right now, they only have these people in the streets. What are you going to do when you have 15, 20 Muslim politicians in Congress, or more people in French and British parliaments or German parliaments, etc.?
Let me give you an Israeli perspective. Nobody here cares. Israelis think it's a part of the Israeli mindset where we get to say what we want to do with ourselves. We don't care. Okay, so America won't give us $4 billion.
It's not only just that, though.
They won't.
But it's not only just that, though. But America stands behind. Okay, I get it that you're saying that this is what Israeli people think, but what about you?
Let me give you the Israeli perspective. They don't care, and they're not thinking about the more than a year in the future, because nobody here thinks about anything past tomorrow. They don't care what the world thinks. They don't care if the world turns against them. They assume the world is against them, and they don't care. Now, coming back to my opinion, what would actually happen is as soon as it really starts to affect the economy, meaning Israeli businesses are starting to fail, meaning high tech and whatever else we have here, or the arms industry, then there might be a move towards softening that arrogant, and I call it arrogant. That's my perspective. It is very arrogant. It may that we are part of an international community, and we have to understand that. Most Israelis do not agree when I say that. They say you're a traitor, you're ridiculous. We can do anything we want. We're allowed. It's okay. So in the long run, you're right. I just don't see Israelis. I constantly say to Americans, okay, take back your $4 billion. But I don't care. It won't make any action.
I wasn't looking at it from the $4 billion point of view. I'm telling you from the Muslim perspective, that because Muslims fear Israel because they feel that the United States is standing behind Israel. If that support starts waning, or the West starts saying, okay, we've got too much trouble, we've got too many Muslims within our own borders, we don't want to get involved anymore, or that support starts waning, do you think in that case then we will start seeing people in Israel? Because this is unsustainable. We're people of the 21st century. You cannot say that, okay, we'll give them semi-self-determination, but we'll keep them occupied. They can make their own little laws in those little enclaves or whatever you want to call them. We're not going to give you full independence. Do you think people would change then if the West starts backing off?
I think it would have to hurt them in their pocketbook. I think that's what it would have to happen. Israelis like to be independent. They like thinking they are a mini America, and that they get to, which understandably we all want that. As a Canadian, I say this as well, but we are all very dependent on the US as well. I don't think that would change. The world support, the Israelis already feel and have always felt that the world hates Jews. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or confirmation bias. Every time we see the protests in a major capital, of course they hate the Jews. Of course. So we're on our own.
Yeah, but I don't think this is a pragmatic approach, because, as I said,
no, it's an emotional approach. It's not. None of it is pragmatic.
But it's almost suicidal in my opinion, because if you're basically saying that, okay, we're going to keep doing this because we've got this military might to keep the status quo going as long as possible, forever, and then you don't have the backing of the West, then who's going to control these 1.8 billion Muslims? You're basically essentializing that, okay, now they can invade Israel. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but I'm just saying, if the political landscape keeps on changing in the West and Muslims become more and more influential in the West, then that could possibly happen in 20, 25 years.
Because it's not also, there's the dynamic part of the reason America is involved because of Iran, and not allowing this to grow out of control. So where other powers in the area, Russia, Iran, start to get involved in these sort of Hezbollah in the north, they're getting involved also, not just because they like the Jews and not just because they're pro-Israel, and they are a little bit. They're more pro-Israel and more pro-Jewish than they are Muslim. But this is more to do, I think, with what's going on in Iran. Meaning, if this whole Iran and Russia thing hadn't been going on for 10 years or more, would America have, or Biden has shown so much support? Probably not. My guess is no. I doubt it. I think it's more to do with the region. But I don't know. I'm not a political scientist or a geopolitical strategist or a military expert in terms of what Israel can do. Israelis constantly tell me, military people, we can handle it on our own. We don't need the US.
For now.
It's great. It's terrific. Yeah, I don't know, but nobody thinks past tomorrow. I could reverse it and say, you're saying it's not pragmatic. I'm dealing with Palestinians all the time talking about how they want everything, which means I work at Tel Aviv University. Tel Aviv University is actually on a village which existed until 1948, which was about 400 years old, called Sheikh Munis. And in the Palestinian mind, the majority of people believe you need to knock down Tel Aviv University, all the billions of dollars that went into that university, and rebuild a village for 300 people and their ancestors. So now that's a couple thousand. Does that pragmatically make any sense? No, but we're dealing with an emotional conflict. And as much as I look at them of, you're crazy, you're probably looking at us thinking, you Israelis, wow, okay. But that's what happens in conflict. People don't think rationally.
No, I understand, but this is why I'm saying that while Israel has all the power, while Israel has the backing of the West, while they're on top, why not try to find out a solution now on your own terms?
Oh, I agree.
But then
Corey, agree.
Yeah, but
they probably won't agree unless it depends on, obviously. So I think the best bet for that, let me cut to the chase. Best bet for that is actually the Gulf countries, the Emirates, the Saudis, getting involved at the end of this or towards the end of this and saying, okay, Israelis and Palestinians, enough is enough. We need to sit down and figure out a solution to this. Now, I know they don't actually care that much about the Palestinians. It's a lot of blah, blah, blah. And they like Israel because it offers them a similar worldview in a lot of senses, and a way to make money, and a way to, but they probably have some anti-Semitic ideas that we're all rich. We are not rich. It turns out it's all a big lie, but it doesn't matter. I wish we
One myth that's been blown out of water.
I wish they would.
One myth that's been blown out of water.
Kidding. You come visit Israel. This place is a third world country. Everything is falling apart. Nothing.
No, but
works.
I thought you guys controlled
We're
ran
on
the
the
media.
bottom end of the.
But I thought you guys ran the media. But look,
what?
But I'm talking about the stereotypes.
Apparently, we do a very bad job.
Yeah, I know you guys are horrible.
So, I'm still waiting for my joke. Is with my videos. From the beginning, I wanted to go to the World Zionist Congress. They actually have a building in Tel Aviv. I suspect it's empty, and I wanted to go. Where's our billions? Where's our money? Where's our control? I want to know, when does something like that come to me? But that's my dark humor. So I wish the Arab countries, the moderate Arab countries, would get involved and say, both of you, because the Palestinians do not want a peace deal. They do not, because to them, that is traitorous and giving up on historic Palestine. So any compromise for the Palestinians is considered traitorous. For Israelis, it's considered threatening. So I guess they're both threatening. For them, it's threatening their identity, because their identity is all about historic Palestine. And for Israel, it's or Israelis and Jews, it's difficult because of the security issue. That's the main issue. If the Saudis and the Emiratis could come in and say, you know what, we're going to help you out with this somehow, which they will not. I know they will not, because they don't want to get into it. They know what Gaza is. They know what the West Bank is like, and how the mindset of a lot of Palestinians, not all, but a lot, of this idea of resistance, constant resistance, and doing anything they can to get back to, or even just the idea of getting back to 1947 Palestine. They don't want that headache. But if they came forward and said, okay, you know what, we're going to help you with this, then there's a chance. Because for some, at least the ones in the center, maybe not the far right, but the ones in the center and even the Likud would be like, okay, maybe this could work. I don't think there'll be a lot of real belief in it, but they might give it a try. And that's what I hope for, because I'm on the sort of left-ish, meaning I believe Palestinians should have self-determination and the same rights as I have. But I don't want to have to die for it. I want them to have their own country, let's say a two-state solution. But I know I would bet my life, I would bet my child's life, that they will shoot rockets from West Bank, which is 10 kilometers from here.
Yeah, but this is what
they will shoot rockets.
okay, so let's go to the possibilities. I've heard this. You could have a federation kind of one state. You could have a one-state solution. You could have a two-state solution.
So all of them are problematic. All of them. So one state, one vote. Fine. We're 50-50 split. If you bring in all the refugees, the Palestinian refugees, either 55, 60% to 40%. We become a minority in our own country. It will be Lebanon. It's time for revenge because everybody is angry.
Even in South Africa.
I don't see how a one-state
even like in South Africa, after all of that, now we're saying how that's panning out. This is why I think, to me, one-state solution is that's just suicide for Israel. So what the other alternative that I look at is a two-state solution. But I've seen this, as I said, only 28% or 29% of Israelis favor the two-state solution.
It was up to 70% on both sides in the 90s.
Really?
So,
wow. So
yeah, it was up to that. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, you have to look at it and you don't call it the two-state solution. You just describe the two-state solution and just not use that word. Right. Because then politically, some people were they were right-wing and they were against the idea of two states. But if you call it they will be independent, they will be, okay, they agreed. So it was up to 70%.
So tell me a little bit about it. But now both sides blame each other. Let's just talk about the history for a little bit. So Peel Commission, they say they were offered 20% of Israel, Muslims didn't take it, and then consequently they were, and then 1948, and then 1953, or 73, and 67. All of these wars happened. Israelis that I read constantly say that we kept offering them a two-state solution. We kept offering them independent Palestine, but they kept rejecting it. Yeah, how true is that? Because, and obviously the most recent one being, and Hillary Clinton's spoken about it too in the time of her husband, Bill Clinton's presidency, where Yasser Arafat apparently he declined it. Why do a lot of Muslims, and this is why I'm a little bit skeptical towards their claim, because those people who say, no, we didn't, it was Israel who sabotaged it, but then now they don't want a two-state solution.
So it all depends on, you're speaking in generalizations and you need to talk specifics. So each side will bring up the cherry-picked information to make their side sound good. Of course. So even in the times I was here in the Oslo years, when I would read the agreements when they were finally, took a long time before they were actually told what the agreements were. And even then, I know a guy who wrote the agreements because he teaches for us at the university. They haven't been, anyway, they're not fully, it's hard to know exactly where in the map everything is. But there was also on the Israeli side, when it was being negotiated and Israelis said we would agree, and it was 70%, there were a lot of bad actors on the Israeli side who really wanted to sabotage it. Of course that happened. The Palestinian side never technically said no. They just never gave an answer. They said, well, think about it. They've been thinking about it since 2008. We've been waiting. Each side is going to use manipulation to make their side seem like we're the okay ones and they're the bad ones. The truth is there's a bit of a mix of both. But I would say, and I'm not just saying this because I happen to be on the Israeli side, came up with all the plans. I don't see any Palestinians that came up with any plan in any way. So in that sense, yes, in the overly simplistic way, Israel came up with various plans. Palestinians effectively said no to the plans. Right. So oversimplistically, yes, Hillary Clinton is right. Bill Clinton is right. He got very frustrated. And I would also say that Palestinians also, or both sides, no, Palestinians more so, do this little trick of where they'll talk about the two-state solution, and then you say that means you give up the right of return to what is today Israel. And they say, no, that's not what we meant. Yeah. Which, to anyone logical, that's what it means.
That would be the whole point.
They were playing a game because the issue is that Palestinian leaders, although they know that they would have to give up the right of return, if they told their people outright, we have to give this up, they would be assassinated. Absolutely. So they can't ever say it. And Palestinians know this. And they know they're playing a game, and they're playing for the long run. They hope in 100, 200, 1,000 years, they'll get all of Palestine back. So they'll wait. It's all okay.
But I've heard some Israelis say that there are a lot of fundamentalist Jews who are more interested in the West Bank than the actual state of Israel, because a lot of significant,
of course, because that's technically that's where the Jews are from.
Judea.
The Judea is that's where our name.
So it has a lot more
comes from.
So it has a lot more religious significance, and those people are even though those
It's about
settlements,
20%.
yeah, those settlements are illegal
Yeah.
under international law. I think, they're illegal under Israeli law as well, because Israel has not formally
No.
annexed the West Bank or Gaza. But they look the other way because they are worried that these people can cause mischief in Israel.
No,
Is
no,
that
no,
right?
no. I don't think that's legally. I don't remember the exact status. I'm not a legal person.
My
All of
question
them.
is, could the state of Israel be actually worried about going after the settlement? And that's why they say, you know what, it's going to cause too much problems, so just go do whatever you want.
A little bit. There's a bit of that because they can get fundamentalist and violent,
Right.
but the state of Israel, even the ones who didn't really agree with the idea of putting settlements in areas of the West Bank, this is back in the 70s and 80s, they still did it. This was on the left as well. It was just seen as a way to diffuse the hopes of Palestinians, hoping that they would become like the way the Arab Israelis became, Palestinians 48, whatever you want to call them, accepting more or less of the idea that Israel exists and this is Israel, and they would somehow accept it.
That's a pretty bad way of making
that. So that was the original
but that's
idea.
a pretty bad idea.
Today, the issue is actually much more economic than it is. It's a little bit of a headache, yes, but more of it is economic because in Gaza, it was at 16,000. I can't remember the numbers of people they had to remove, and they had to pay them off with 1,000,000 shekels each, which is like $300,000. And just in terms of that amount of money, if you had to pay off all these settlers who probably wouldn't leave anyways, I don't see how you could do it. The better way to do this, because people think, first of all, everyone talks about the settlements. It's an issue. I agree. I'm actually anti-settlement. I always thought it was ridiculous. But settlement land, meaning settlement, you have a fence around a settlement, that piece of land is only 3% of the West Bank. 3%. Yeah. We're not talking about that much. However, wait, I'll give you the pro-Palestinian view now. A lot of those 3% is intermixed around other Palestinian villages. There are areas where there are blocks, so you could carve that out as part of Israel. You could do that. And you would actually include some of those small Palestinian villages in Israel. Okay. And then some of the more outlying settlements are a little more problematic. And actually, East Jerusalem is probably the biggest issue because they've built Jewish areas to surround Jerusalem and a lot of Arab areas. So it'd be like a weird Swiss cheese if you had two states. So it's possible, but very difficult. And then you have to think of what is a logical thing to do. What's going to make sense financially, economically, safe, security-wise? What is going to make sense? And the problem is everyone speaks through either their political views or their religious views, and it's very hard to differentiate what is logical and practical versus just somebody's viewpoint, and you can't change it. It's really hard to do. And I would have to take you on a little tour of the land to show you how complicated it is.
Yeah, but who has made it that complicated? As I said, if Israel has...
Oh, Israel. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was done purposely.
You said that originally it was done to make the Palestinians realize or make them understand the fact that...
Well, originally it was security reasons. But
that's a pretty bad way.
Secondarily.
If anything, you're going to antagonizing people who already feel...
No, because it worked. It worked in the 50s and 60s with Israeli Arabs. If you look at it in an overly simplistic way, when they did not yet have a Palestinian nationalism, Israeli Arabs were Arabs and Muslims, didn't consider themselves Palestinians. Right. Palestinianness didn't really, it was in intellectual Arab Muslim thinking back in the 20s for sure, in the 30s and the 40s, it was. But for the regular average people, it was not until around the 60s. It just was. And that's a reality. I'm not saying there's not a Palestinian people. That's not my argument. My argument is if you were a person living in Nazareth or in Bethlehem in 1950, what did you consider yourself? At the time, you'd be Jordanian, or in Bethlehem, or in Nazareth, you'd be like, I'm an Arab in Israel. You wouldn't consider yourself Israeli, but you were an Arab Muslim, whatever. It just, the times changed. That's what happens. Similar to, I've heard an international lawyer say, Israel was given a certain piece of land in 1947, and then by 1949, with the ceasefire, it gained more land in battle. That in 1949 was considered absolutely legitimate. By 67, 70s, conquering the West Bank and Sinai and all was considered somehow illegitimate by international standards. That there was just a change in the international, how people saw things. It wasn't that law changed, it was that how the world saw different situations changed. And so the leaders at the time, they were hoping, let's try this and let's hope it works. For Arab Israelis, I think it worked okay. I think Arab Israelis, I was just out asking them questions for the Ask Project, and they don't feel 100% Israeli, but they feel probably more Israeli than like a West Bank Palestinian. They don't want to live under PA rule. They don't want to live under Hamas, for sure. They would much rather live under Israel. And they're not just telling me this. This is, you can see this is legitimate. But they still feel they are ethnically Palestinians and they want
there's no ethnic
socially to be.
Yeah. Well, there's no ethnically Palestinian. They're ethnically Arabs. That's what you mean.
No, they see themselves as ethnically Palestinian, more or less, but different than the ones who live in the West Bank. Because they grew up in a very different reality, and they have a lot more wealth, and they have rights.
Yes.
They do not, that people in the West Bank do not.
Yes, so it's a very common phrase that is thrown around, especially in the Western leftist circles, that it's an apartheid state. And I've seen a lot of videos. I obviously don't know. So far, you've painted a very honest picture, so I can trust your opinion on that. Why do you think these people call it an apartheid state?
It's a simplistic slogan that you can use to say I suffer or I have needs that.
Is there a difference in rights or something? So, I heard that they have a different colored card or something.
No. Okay, so you have to differentiate. We have to talk about the different groups. So do you want me to start with the most apartheid or the least?
Most apartheid.
Where do you want me?
Yeah.
Most apartheid. Hebron. Hebron is the most apartheid. You go to the city of Hebron. The city of Hebron is actually massive. And 98% of it is controlled by Palestinians and 2% is controlled by Israel, if I'm remembering my amounts properly. There is a place you could walk around it. It's not that big. That part, that 2%, yes, that I could say is somewhat apartheid-ish, meaning there were times, it's no longer true, but there were times when Palestinians had to walk on one side of the street and there was a barrier, and Jews, or actually Arab Israelis, could walk on the other side, right? If you showed your ID and you're an Arab Israeli, it had nothing to do with being Arab.
Right.
It had to do with, are you a West Bank Palestinian or are you not?
Right.
Yeah, or not. You could be an international too. You could be, there's many things you could be. So that I think was as close as we got to apartheid. By the way, me as a Jew, not even an Israeli, there are areas where I go, because of agreements with the Palestinians and the Muslims, I have to state I am a Christian to go to a different area because Jews are not allowed to that area because the Muslims don't want Jews going into their mosque. It's at the Cave of the Patriarchs. Whereas actually, the same place, I have brought Muslims to the Jewish equivalent in that area. So that is, and it's more so if you're a Palestinian, you get screwed, and less if you're a Jew. Okay, so that's the most apartheid. Then there's West Bank Palestinians.
But there's no difference in rights, though, other than that. And that's only in 2% of Hebron, as you said, in some other place.
Oh, no, there's difference in rights completely. A West Bank Palestinian does not have the same rights as I do. They cannot vote. They do not have an Israeli passport.
Yeah, but that's a Palestinian territory.
They do not have
that's because
that's Palestinian territory.
So no, that's not what I meant. I meant by apartheid.
Yeah, none of this was, by the way, this is what annoys me about the pro-Palestinian people, is that they think this was all created magically by a guy with a mustache doing this 70 years ago. No, this was all like a Band-Aid on a Band-Aid to fix situations. And we end up with this ridiculous situation. So in the West Bank Palestinians and East Jerusalem Palestinians do not have a passport and they cannot vote.
How did they travel?
East Jerusalem Palestinians, though.
How do they travel?
Sorry?
They have their own Palestinian passport?
They have either a Jordanian passport or they get a laissez-passer, which is Palestinian passport, but it's not a real passport. And they have to go through Jordan if they want to travel. They cannot go through, most of them. A few of them, if they get special permission, can go through the Israeli airport.
Right. Yes, when I heard about this apartheid, I thought they meant that Israeli Arabs and then Israeli Jews, they have some different set of...
They are completely equal. Completely,
not a difference,
legally.
Zero difference.
Yes, legally equal. Legally. A law that applies to me equally applies to them. A law that applies to them equally applies to me. Now, you'll always hear there are 52, 55, 68 laws in Israel that it's on the Adalah website, ADALLAH. I actually work with them. It is a bit of propaganda. Laws in Israel that you can interpret as being anti-Palestinian or for the benefit of the Jews. Fair enough. But they're not 52. I went through a lot of them, and the only one I can really see, which is semi-problematic, is if you were a Jew, you could move to Israel, get citizenship. Not automatically. It takes a couple of weeks, but you have to prove your Jewishness through a rabbi and a letter and blah, blah, blah. And you can become an Israeli citizen. A Palestinian from 1946 who left and no longer has any citizenship in Israel cannot do that. But by the way, Germany has similar laws. Japan has similar laws, not about Jews, obviously, but about people who are Japanese or people who are German, or countries do have those laws. So it's not that out of the ordinary. The other laws are absolutely equal between citizens, but there is some social discriminations. I can agree with it. There's racism. People won't say anything. Nobody's going to come up to you and say something. But I know because I'm part of Jewish society, so I hear it sometimes. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Now, obviously, this is a very bloody conflict. A lot of people have died. I think fatigue is going to kick in eventually in the Western leadership. And to the best of my knowledge, it appears that Israel obviously would not be able to indefinitely carry out these operations. First of all, do you think Israel would be able to take out Hamas or significantly weaken it to a point where they're going to give up their resistance? Or if not, obviously, I think that's the most obvious answer. Then what's the end game? What do you think Israel's end game would be as far as this conflict is concerned?
What Israel wants, what I want, we all agree, actually. By the way, Arab Israelis agree with this too, is they do not want this constant, up until October 7th, the idea was conflict management. Let me simplify it that way. Where Qatar would pay off Hamas to be quiet and not be as violent. And as soon as Hamas started to run out of money or they got annoyed by something, they would riot. And then Qatar would come in and Egypt would come in and they would all negotiate. And basically they would be paid off in money. That's what really would happen. And Israel allowed it. They weren't happy with it. Nobody was happy with it. Everyone knew probably not a great solution. But you know what? It's quiet enough. October 7th changed that, in that we cannot trust them at all, both Hamas and probably Palestinians in general. There's a lot of rethinking about what do we need to do to ensure Israeli security. Because Israelis, by the way, are hypersensitive when it comes to violence against Jews. Just the way Arabs are hypersensitive about occupations and colonizations because of historical reasons. And Islam.
About Islam.
Big issue.
About the honor of the Prophet.
About Islam, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So each one has its little triggers. For Jews, it's violence. It just is. We are hypersensitive about violence because of our histories. So I don't know. The end game is somehow, no idea how this is going to happen, but that Palestinians will rule themselves in some way in the West Bank and Gaza, the way they've been doing up until now, but Israel will have complete security control somehow. Nobody knows. Ideas are thrown around on the news. Politicians throw ideas. No idea how that can happen that really makes sense and gives at least Israelis what they want. I have no idea.
But there's a drift.
Nobody knows.
But it seems like there's a rift between the West, or America, and Israel. Bibi Netanyahu, for that matter. He's saying that, okay, we're going to go in, we're going to take over the educational system, we're going to run it to root out.
I don't know. Nobody really wants to run.
Yeah, but he's saying that though.
He wants somebody. They want is actually some other they want the Arabs to come in. They want Egypt to come in and run it, and he's going to dictate to Egypt, you cannot teach hate, which is true. By the way, they've been teaching hate since the Oslo Accords, at least. I don't know about before that, but I'm assuming they have been teaching what people learn in schools. I see what people are learning in schools. Palestinian children. I see what they're talking about. There's a lot of mythologies about the Jews, a lot of hate towards the Jews, and it's not just 100%, as you said before. It's based a lot on Islam, not 100% based on the fact that they were occupied. So what he's saying, in other words, is that not that Israel's going to do it, but Israel's going to dictate. That's the Israeli arrogance of we're going to tell people what to do. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know. I would love to think it is. I would love to dictate to people what to think, but I don't see how it's possible.
No, it never is possible. But the problem is when you think that it might be possible, so you end up doing it, and as a result, you end up doing more damage, more bad than good. But okay, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in. I think I might have to bring you in some other time as well, because there's a few more people that I want to talk to. Because first of all, thank you for a very honest conversation. I think that you drew a very honest picture. It wasn't one-sided, or at least I didn't get that impression. And that is what I'm trying.
No, I'm trying to give you, these are just my perceptions. Again, the YouTube channel is called Ask an Israeli, Ask a Palestinian. Look it up. What I like about it, sorry, I'll plug this, is that people will watch the same video I experienced and come to different conclusions. Okay, it is what it is. I'm giving you my perceptions of what my experiences here with Israelis and Palestinians and what I see. If you guys see, whoever's listening to this, see something different, okay, it is what it is. And if even better, you can come up with better solutions than the rest of us, because I know they say the Jews are smart, but I'm sorry, no.
Yeah, well,
we're not that smart.
As I said, this conflict,
I don't think anyone here is that smart. We need help.
As I said, this conflict has broken a lot of stereotypes. We thought that you control the world's financial system, you run the world media, all the politicians are in your pockets, but I'm sorry, you guys have failed in
even the whole thing of the Israeli military knows everything. As someone who lives here,
Mossad being
someone who lives here who's brainwashed by the system, meaning a lot of Israelis just blindly also believe that too. I was shocked what happened October 7th, but at the same time, I'm not that surprised. I've seen incredible incompetence by the military and by the government for sure, but even by the military, who is better than the government and wiser than the government often, but incredible incompetence by them. This was a huge screw up, but yeah, we need to learn our lessons from this.
Right. All right, guys, you heard it. This is obviously Corey Gil-Shuster, and as I said, you can look it up. Do check out his channel. It's got 302,000 subscribers. Pretty big channel. Subscribe it. And as he said, he goes in, speaks to Israelis and Palestinians, asks them questions in a simplified manner. And I think that's the best thing we can do, rather than just spouting out our opinions. Maybe take a pause and listen to what other people are saying. Hope you enjoyed this episode.
And come here and ask the same kind of questions yourself. Yeah. It's not hard to go around to these places. It really isn't for anybody.
Yeah, I do want to come to Israel at some point, hopefully after this conflict. So I'll definitely come. Until next time, ta-da. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
If you'd like to support my work, you can become my patron by going to patreon.com/Haris Sultan, or you can simply buy me a coffee.